watching. We are coming in here at this hour as the journey of former President Jimmy Carter to Washington, D.C., his final journey now begins. You can see now the presidential car or the now moving. We can see there now, according to the program. All right. According to the schedule guide given to or given by the Carter Center at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the president or the body of the former president will leave at the Carter Presidential Center for the final time with a departure ceremony. The family then accompanies the remains to Dobbins Air Reserve Base outside of Atlanta. At 12:10 p.m., the casket of the former president will arrive, and at 12:45, the family and the remains of the president will board Special Air Mission 39 and depart for Washington. Let's now watch as the prepare for the president's final journal. again, for those who have just joined us, this is Capital Politics Special Report, remembering former President Jimmy Carter. We are following the President's final journal to Washington, D.C., and at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the remains of the former president will leave the Carter Center in Atlanta. For those of you, I'm Ethan Vargas reporting from Capital Politics World Headquarters here in the Philippines. Good morning. It's 12:22 a.m. here in Manila. We're following the latest or the final farewell of the nation to former President Jimmy Carter.
to you.
Cheryl, I was thinking about something that you said a few hours ago that I think we ought to talk about briefly. Is the Carter family will be getting out of the limousine in Washington, D.C., which will mirror what Mr. and Mrs. Carter did on the day of the inauguration in 1977. It's one of those moments in American history that is a searing memory of the Carter White House and certainly of 20th century America.
Yes, it's something we should all watch together, knowing that context, right? That on that inauguration day in 1977, where Mr. and Mrs. Carter were in that limousine and just going to drive to their next destination, they stopped everything at the suggestion of their son Chip and said, we want to get out, we want to walk Pennsylvania Avenue. Well, that had never happened before, and Secret Service scrambled to follow them, and President Carter, holding Mrs. Carter's hand, she was in this beautiful green peacoat, waved to the crowd on a blue sky day and really symbolized their hope to be of the people, to be accessible, to be down to earth, to be a different kind of first couple in Washington. And I think that's really poignant. And today we'll see the entire Carter family walking behind that horse-drawn caisson, that flag-draped casket on the horse-drawn casket as it makes that final trek to the U.S. Capitol. That will be a moment that will be significant and touching as we all watch together, and more so understanding how that bookends this moment in history for the family and for the country.
Cheryl, I think it really illustrates just how far and how much we have changed in almost 50 years of not only politics, but life in this country. That I still remember, and I've seen this on YouTube, where Walter Cronkite and some of the anchors at the other networks were stunned. They were shocked when the Carters got out of the limousine. It was like this amazing thing that nobody had ever seen, and it was stunning people. I mean, we look at that now like, you know, why was that a big deal? It was a very, very big deal in our interpretation of politics from a social standpoint of how things have evolved, not necessarily for the better, it was just different.
That's such a good point, and something we'll all watch together here January 20th when we're on the verge of another inauguration, just how that is just something we expect to see now, but something that the Carters just set into motion. And when they came to Washington, D.C., out of the governor's office in Georgia, they said, we're going to do some things the way we think they need to be done. First and foremost, they said they pledged never to lie to the American public. And even after his presidency, Mr. Carter said, people may not have agreed with everything I did. Maybe they don't agree with my politics, but I kept an oath never to tell a lie to the American people and to withhold peace and do my best for the American public every day. And aside from politics, he certainly kept that commitment to do good and try to give his best to the people as long as he had the energy to do that. And we saw that happen well into his 90s.
Cheryl Preheim joining us live from D.C. We'll be checking back with you in just a bit, but in case you were just joining us, you were taking a look on the left of your screen of the motorcade making its way to Dobbins Air Reserve Base, which is where you see Special Air Mission 39 on the right of your screen. We expect it to arrive there in the next 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, and there is where we'll see a departure ceremony. The family of the late president will fly with his remains to the nation's capital, where they'll also have a ceremony. Once he arrives in Washington, they'll have another ceremony where he'll be taken past the Naval Memorial and then to the United States Capitol, where members of Congress, they'll have a ceremony. We expect Vice President Kamala Harris to deliver the eulogy in that moment. And then from there, the public from around the world, from across the country, will have a moment to see the president lie in state from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m.
And we just heard from the Carter Center that they expect that the ceremony there will start right around 12:05. So running a few minutes ahead of schedule. So again, the motorcade making its way to Dobbins Air Reserve, where we will, for the most part, have a silent ceremony. You'll hear a couple of musical selections, Hail to the Chief. Also, a 21-gun salute will be a part of this service. Immediately following that, we'll see the Army maneuver. They'll maneuver into their band position, and you'll hear another grandfather and a great-grandfather was that of a Sunday school teacher. His son said that's one of the things he wanted to be remembered most for was being a grandfather and his role in the church.
The thing that's always amazed me about Jimmy Carter, among many things, is his ability to take influence from things that you might think that he wouldn't find solace in or influence. I'm going to give a quick example. Near Columbus, Georgia, on the Alabama state line, is a mythical place created by an eccentric artist by the name of George Martin, who died in 1986. It is called Passaquan, and it is maintained. It's a mythical kingdom of androgynous figures of art and spirituality. And Jimmy Carter, Greg Allman, and Michael Stipe of REM would tour this place and find great influence in it. You wouldn't expect Jimmy Carter to find influence in a place.
Is riding or driving now on this way to special air mission um that's on Dublin's Air Reserve Base, where there will be a departure ceremony. As of 12:43, they are still crossing the way going to Dublin's Air Reserve Base. And for those, I'm still Ethan Vargas reporting from Capital Politics headquarters. We're still watching the live coverage of the former president's state funeral. So stay with us. This is continuing Capital Politics special coverage of remembering former President Jimmy Carter.
Things that really define living here. I sort of look at this and look, nobody lives forever, and he lived to be 100. But at the same time, it is a sort of realization of the passage of time, of our own mortality in many ways. I guess Jimmy Carter was a larger-than-life figure around here for so long, going back to the mid-1960s. I guess you just never really thought of him dying. And he had been able to get around dying, whether it was, in 2015 or hospice. He was just one of those guys who just seemed to defy whatever conventional wisdom was.
That's true. And, we talked about comparing this to other funerals or other presidencies. And I think the biggest difference is that we focus so much on him as a person, his humanitarian work, and all that he did after the White House. I think in the past, usually with the presidential funeral, much of the focus is on what they did in office, the policy, or what they perhaps did not do. But for him, it's all that life that he lived after leaving Washington that really is what touches people, I think.
Sometimes I drive around Atlanta and I think, you think that time doesn't pass, and then I look at all of these streets, whether it's the John Lewis Freedom Parkway or Jimmy Carter Boulevard, or Ambassador Andrew Young statue downtown, or Reverend Lowry, or Hosea Williams. We knew all these people. They were among us, these great lions of Atlanta in the civil rights movement, in American politics, in American life. They were people that we took for granted for the most part, and now they are all gone, and now their names are on streets, they're on statues, and that in itself gives you pause for reflection just about the passage of time. And I think that's what these images of President Carter on the way to Dobbins and then on the way to Washington, D.C., that, here we are. It's 2025, and he's not here anymore.
Not here anymore. And as we said, there's never going to be another Jimmy Carter. There's just no one like him.
We'll never see a life like this. And this is not whether you agree with him politically or you agree with anything. It's just, this is a life that I don't know who you compare him to in the 20th century. I really don't. I mean, I always think that it's important at some point, if you've lived here a long time and you love this state, to make the drive to Plains and turn off your radio as you do it, just to get a sense of, look where he came from. How did he do this? What sort of talents did he have to be able to rise from this place in Sumter County to where he went in his life? It is a staggering thing to ponder.
And I think that's why we saw so many different generations go to the Carter Center to see him lie in repose. I was standing by the memorial sign, and I saw a mom explaining to her child after they went through the exhibit who Jimmy Carter was, asking, hey, Mom, why are there peanuts at the bottom of the sign? Why is there a Braves cap? And at that memorial, you just saw different chapters of his life. You saw a construction hat from a Habitat for Humanity build. It's just so much that we've learned about this man over the course of the last few weeks, and we're going to continue to see that. And when we go to Washington, you'll get another opportunity to see the different people who will show up from across the country who want to take part in this moment, to see him lie in state.
Well, he lived to be 100, but the one thing that never changed with Jimmy Carter, he was always an advocate for poor people, for black and white. And that never changed in his life. He was always an advocate trying to make lives better, whether that was economic or it was with health or it was with food. It was just any way that he could help people in need or people who necessarily were unable to help themselves within, where they lived. Jimmy Carter was a great advocate for them, and I think that's the hallmark of his life.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's so remarkable because those aren't things you have to do, right? Like, my pastor used to say, people don't have to be nice to you. They don't have to do good. But in someone of his stature, and to do it for so long, so many people will have a moment where they do a good deed, and that's their good deed.
He never lost his ambition.
Yeah, it went on forever, as long as he could. I mean, we look at those images of him with, sick and, falling and with black eye and still out there helping people. And it's just really remarkable when you think about the longevity of not just his life, but the longevity of the compassion,
politics. It transcended generations. He just never lost his fervor to contribute and to help.
And Jonathan, you speak of what people do not have to do. He was a one-term president. He lost by a landslide to Ronald Reagan. He could have just went back to Plains, sat at his home, and just allowed his life to pass by. But we heard the president of Emory say the presidency was a stepping stone for Jimmy Carter and all the remarkable things that he's done over the course of 100 years. So this is why we've been extensively covering the state funeral of the late president, because we will probably never see such grand ceremonies for a person like this.
Certainly not in Georgia. I mean, he's our first and only president from Georgia. Right now, you're looking live as the motorcade is arriving here momentarily at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. We understand that the service will get underway just
This behemoth, and it all started with a handshake in 1981.
That's incredible. Again, you're looking live right now at Dobbins Air Reserve Base on your right, where a special air mission 39 will take off, heading up to Washington, D.C. within the next 30 minutes or so. We understand that the ceremony here will get underway right after noon today. We'll see the family also there as a part of this ceremony. You see the band. You can see some of the instruments there on the left of your screen. We know there will be a couple of musical selections played. Again, if you look right there, I believe the motorcade is now arriving there to Dobbins.
Welcome. For those joining
Once
us,
the
this is
motorcade arrives, they'll get in
special
place
report.
for the ceremony. The family will
President Jimmy
leave their
Carter.
vehicles and they'll get in place for the ceremony.
Casket
Again,
will now
that'll
arrive
start
at Dobbins
right
Air
around
Reserve in just
12:05, we're
a
told.
moment.
The
Let's
ceremonial
watch
troops
later.
you'll see present arms for ruffles and flourishes. I'll also hear "Hail to the Chief." And that 21-gun salute will take place before Special Air Mission 39 departs for Washington.
And I do want to add that the family, they will fly with the late president to the nation's capital. They've been a part of this ceremony at every moment over the last 7 days or so. And, you just think about if a family member of yours passed away. You had that moment to grieve privately, but this family, they've done so with the community. They've had the support of everyone, with the members of the Carter Center. When they go over to Washington, D.C., they'll have members of Congress continue to just celebrate the person that was their grandfather, was their father, or someone that they knew so closely, has so many personal moments with. So, you really appreciate this family for sharing, their grandfather or their father with the world.
And they've been preparing for this moment for a while. In an interview, his grandson, Jason Carter, said, look, we knew the end was near. They've known that for a while. But he said it doesn't make it any easier, but we've known, and so we've prepared for this moment. But he talked about just still how tough it is when you actually have to go through it. He says none of us really knows what the end of life is like until you get there. And so he really talked about that.
I've always wondered about the impact on the Carter family, in that it's not the same as if my father passes away at 100 or ours. But when you have this larger-than-life figure in American history that shadows your every step, it's trying to find your own identity underneath the shadow of Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind must be an extraordinary thing if you are a child or even if you're a grandchild trying to find your way. There are great advantages to it, obviously, but the disadvantages would have to be legion as well. There must be a different set of feelings when you lose a parent of this magnitude who has meant this much to the country and to the world. What that must feel like. It must take on a totally different kind of vibe about it.
And in some ways, you really shared them with all of us. Chip Carter mentioned that at the arrival ceremony. He said sometimes we had to schedule time with Dad, with Mom, because they were so many places and they were so many things to so many people, traveling the world. But they also realized the importance of that mission. But it said sometimes it was tough. So
I think it's interesting to see, Jason has led, you went to Duke, a successful attorney, did very well against Nathan Deal running for governor. He may run for governor again here in the next year or so. That's one of the stories certainly to follow. But you look at Amy, who was a child in the White House, who had to deal with all of those issues as a kid, and has led a very successful, quiet life living in Candler Park. And Chip has led a successful life too. He lives in Decatur, and they have all led successful lives.
All right, you're looking right now live as the ceremony is set to get underway here within the next 5 or 10 minutes.
Alright, we can see right now, if you're not mistaken, you can see right now the family of the former president now arriving um as the cast of the former president arrives there in Dobbers Air Reserve, where he will fly for the last time to Washington, D.C.
depart for Washington, D.C. during warmer days. President Carter's great love of baseball and Braves, Cobb County and Turner Field, Atlanta, Fulton County Stadium. And, you know, we've talked about how he was good at a myriad of things, whether it was fly fishing or woodworking or art, or he wrote poetry as a means of expression and a means of relaxation. But he's one of the few public officials who get the opportunity to throw out the first pitch who look like he knew how to throw a baseball. And,
Yeah.
you know, he spent all those years playing baseball in Sumter County and leading up to the White House and during the White House years, having those famous softball games with his brother Billy involved, playing softball against the media. And, you know, he was very athletic. He was running up until he was 80. And, you know, we look back and say, wow, how did this guy live to be 100? Well, in part, he was very, very active, very, very athletic, running, and, you know, he liked to throw a ball around, and was a guy who was very, very physically active at a time when, you know, a lot of American politicians were a lot more sedate.
Yeah, you look at some of the videos we've been showing, and you have to really think, wow, he was 90 years old here. He was 92 years old here. Sometimes it doesn't click when you see the activity matched with what he was doing.
Yes, that's why I would say age is relative. It depends on how well you take care of yourself. And, you know, he took care of himself, he took care of others, and I think that's one of the reasons why he lived so long, because, you know, God didn't want him to leave. He wasn't done. His work wasn't done here. So,
not yet.
You know, what is it our mothers always tell us? Live everything in moderation, you know, and he certainly did everything, at least health-wise, in moderation.
He did, he did. Right now, you're taking a live look again here in Marietta, Cobb County, at the Dobbins Air Reserve Base. We expect within the next 2 or 3 minutes the service to start here. It'll be more of a ceremony. You won't really hear anyone speak, but you'll hear a couple of music selections. You'll also hear the 21-gun salute before Special Air Mission 39 takes off to Washington, where we understand there will be a national funeral, a national service happening later this afternoon. That's going to get underway around 3:45 or so. Again, things are running a few minutes ahead of schedule, but we've also been talking about the weather today in D.C. and how that could play a role in the timing of everything. But we know the president will be lying in state in the Capitol. Our Cheryl Preheim has been there. We'll be checking back with her again later. But right now, this is part of the final goodbye to Georgia. Again, the president will be making his way back here to Georgia on Thursday, where he will be having a final resting place back where it all started in Plains, Georgia, reunited with his wife, Rosalind, which I think is really part of this whole, you know, state funeral that's really special, that it really will end back to his humble beginnings.
And right now you're seeing some special guests that were invited by the Carter Center. You have Governor Brian Kemp. He is standing there for this departure ceremony, as well as Mayor Andre Dickens, the Carter Center Board of Counselors. They're also there, the Carter family. They are there, and this will be, as you mentioned, a very quiet ceremony. We are just waiting for the remains to be loaded onto Special Mission 39.
Ceremonial and leave.
Right, the departure ceremony will start just minutes from now. We are preparing and waiting for the late president, President Jimmy Carter's remains to be loaded onto Special Mission 39 right now. You're taking a live look at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. We see special guests of the Carter family, dignitaries, local officials, Governor Brian Kemp, Mayor Andre Dickens, waiting for that final moment where we will see the late president take his final journey to the nation's capital.
Washington is going to be a very, very busy place for the next 13 days. The inauguration is the 20th. Here we are, and we are sitting on January 7th. So these two events of a lot of detail and a lot of dignitaries certainly are nestled next to each other.
Yeah, a lot of security, too. We've been talking about that, considering this is all happening after the certification of the election results yesterday and other events happening. So we're going to be seeing a lot, but hopefully everything will go according to plan. We know a lot of these plans have been in place for many years, and many specific details, exactly how President Carter wanted them to go. Again, for the most part, this will be a quiet service, a quiet send-off. You'll hear the 21-gun salute. You'll hear a couple of musical selections by the band before the national service that we'll see take place in Washington.
And the 21-gun salute is one of the highest military salutes you can give to and a moment to honor a head of state, a fallen hero. It is really a national occasion, and this is what we're witnessing right now. We're witnessing a moment in history where the motorcade carrying the remains of the late president is arriving on the tarmac before it is loaded onto Special Air Mission 39.
So much of this tradition has been really rooted in the funeral of Abraham Lincoln in 1865, and that tradition of burying an American president certainly has followed the choreography of that tragic event so long ago. But it is interesting how in a country that doesn't embrace a lot of tradition and a lot of nuance from the past, we certainly do when it comes to events such as burying a U.S. president.
You're looking right now live at the Air Reserve Base as the hearse is now making its way in for this service, this ceremony that we'll see take place here any moment now. Special Air Mission 39, taking the president up to Washington. And again, this special air mission will also be returning President Carter back here to Atlanta, the Atlanta area, and then eventually planes after some time in Washington.
That was a quick trip from the Carter Library and the Carter Center.
Yeah, quicker than they thought. You know, they had originally planned to arrive around this time, but a few minutes early.
Anytime anyone is able to navigate in the midst of Atlanta traffic, you know something is going on.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's true. Well, they seem to have a pretty clear way, especially this time of day. I think probably was a good opportunity for them to avoid some of that normal traffic, even with the motorcade.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the weather in Washington, D.C. has been bitterly cold today, though there has not been any snow. There is snow on the ground, but it has delayed events by about an hour. And I think one of the things worth watching in the hours ahead is to see how that weather may impact more of what is to come. We simply don't know that. I think we'll have a better sense of that once the plane lands in D.C.
And the family is loaded into this motorcade. They're on the buses behind the hearse, where they also witness this departure ceremony that will get underway in just a matter of minutes, which is what we are looking at live at the moment.
You see the American flag and the flag of the president.
salutes for the former president. Let's now watch the arrival ceremony for the casket of the former president. Right, the family of the former president now enters Special Air Mission 39. The blue, I don't know what that's called. There's the casket of the former president. It will be loaded um, also on that same airplane. The plane is called Special Air Mission 39, and at 12:45 p.m. it will depart for Washington, and at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time it will arrive at Joint Base Andrews. We're not gonna cover it, but don't forget to join us on on the coverage of um, the state funeral, the national funeral service that will be on Thursday. But let's first watch what's the latest or the live there at Dobbins Air Reserve Base in Georgia. The casket has now been loaded. If I'm not mistaken, is now or has been loaded in the plane in the car that brought the remains of our president, and also I think the family's car is now leaving the Dobbins Air Reserve Base that's there in Georgia as the former president flies for the final time, actually not, but his final journey back to Washington, D.C.